age of iron, before the whispers of philosophy crept into the minds of men, there was an age when the gods walked openly among mortals. When every thunderclap carried the weight of Zeus's contemplation, every wave the mood of Poseidon's heart, every shadow the reach of Hades across the boundary between living and dead. This is the world as it was, eternal, ordered, bound by threads that even the gods could not sever. On a hillside overlooking the Aegean Sea, a shepherd named Theron tended his flock as his father had done, and his father before him, back 7 generations to the first man who had seen Apollo's chariot trace its burning path across the sky, and known it for what it was. The sun warmed his shoulders. The cicadas sang their endless summer song. And high above, invisible to mortal eyes, the gods of Olympus observed the affairs of men, with the distant interest of those who had witnessed empires rise and crumble like sandcastles before the tide. Theron did not know he was being watched. He did not know that his quiet life as a shepherd would, before the sunset, become a memory that bards would sing of for 1,000 years. He only knew that the sky was splitting open. It began not with sound, but with silence. The cicadas stopped. The wind died. The waves below the cliff fell still as if the sea itself held its breath. Theron rose from the rock where he had been sitting, his staff falling from nerveless fingers, his eyes fixed on the heavens above. High above Mount Olympus, where even the eyes of eagles could not reach, the fabric of reality began to tear. It was not a crack in the sky as mortals understood cracks, not a fissure in stone or a split in wood. This was something older, something that should not exist, a wound in the cosmos itself, bleeding light that had never touched this world before. The color of it defied description. It was gold, and it was not gold. It was white, and it was not white. It was the color of potential, of possibility, of things that had never been woven into the tapestry of fate. The shepherds on the hills fell to their knees. In the cities below, priests rushed to altars, consulting omens that had never appeared in any sacred text. Warriors gripped their swords and found their hands trembling. Children pointed skyward and asked questions their parents could not answer. On Olympus, the gods felt it before they saw it. Zeus sat upon his throne of carved storm cloud, the great hall of the gods falling silent around him as the Thunderbringer's eyes lifted toward a ceiling that should have shown only the eternal blue of the heavens. Instead, through the marble and the cloud and the very fabric of divine space, he saw it. The tear. "Father," Athena spoke, rising from her place among the council. Her gray eyes, bright with the wisdom of ages, studied the phenomenon with an intensity that belied her calm voice. "Something approaches." "I can see that, daughter." Zeus's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder. The other gods felt it in their bones. Ares reaching for his spear, Apollo rising from his seat by the window of light, Hermes pausing mid-stride with one foot still in the air. Even Hera, who had seen empires fall and heroes rise and fall again, felt something cold trace its way down her spine. "What is it?" Ares demanded, his hand already wrapped around his spear. "What enemy dares approach Olympus unannounced?" "It is no enemy we know," Athena replied, her voice soft with wonder. "Look at the light, brother. Look at the nature of the tear. This is not the work of Titans returned. This is not the hand of chaos reaching from the depths. This is something else." The tear widened, and through it, falling as a mortal falls when pushed from great height, came a figure. He fell with the awkwardness of one who had not expected to fall. Arms windmilling, legs kicking at empty air, a voice crying out in a language that had never been spoken in this world, a cry that was equal parts surprise and something that might almost have been excitement. He tumbled through the tear in reality, spun twice in the air, and then stopped. Not slowed, not gradually descended. Stopped as if the concept of falling had simply ceased to apply to him. He hung in the air above the Aegean, 3,000 feet above the waves, and looked around with an expression of pure, childlike wonder. Theron, the shepherd, saw him clearly. They all saw him clearly, mortals and gods alike, though none could say how. He was not close enough to be seen. He should have been a speck against the sky, invisible to mortal eyes. But something about his presence demanded perception. Something about his arrival meant that all who looked skyward saw him as clearly as if he stood before them. He was small. That was the first thing Theron noticed. For a being who had torn open the sky itself, he was remarkably small. Not a giant, not a titan, a man, or something like a man, with dark hair that stood in impossible spikes and eyes that caught the light and held it. He wore clothing unlike any Theron had ever seen. Bright colors, strange fabrics, boots that looked suited for walking among the clouds. On his back, he carried a staff, though it was like no staff any shepherd had ever carved. And he was smiling. The figure, this being who had fallen from a wound in reality, hung in the air above the sea, turned in a slow circle, and spoke words that every mortal and god somehow understood. Wow, this place is amazing. The energy here feels totally different. In the hall of the gods, silence reigned. It was Hermes who broke it, though even the messenger god's voice was quieter than usual. He doesn't seem hostile. He tore a hole in reality, Ares growled. He fell from somewhere that is not anywhere. He speaks in a tongue that should be incomprehensible, and yet we understand him. And you say he doesn't seem hostile because he smiled? He does seem rather cheerful, Apollo observed, and there was something in his voice that might have been amusement, if amusement were possible in such a moment. Look at him. He's examining the clouds like a child examining flowers. Indeed, the figure had drifted closer to Olympus, not walking, not flying in any way the gods recognized, but simply moving through the air, as if the laws that governed such things were suggestions he had chosen to ignore. He reached out and touched a passing cloud, his face lighting with wonder as his hand passed through it. It's like alive, he said, and again, all who heard understood. The clouds here are different. They have more presence. Zeus rose from his throne. The motion was slow, deliberate, heavy with the weight of ages. When the king of the gods stood, storms stirred in distant corners of the world. Lightning flickered at the edges of the sky. The very air grew heavy with the promise of power held in check. Who approaches Olympus? Zeus's voice rolled across the heavens, and the figure in the sky turned to face him. For a long moment they regarded each other, the king of gods and the stranger from beyond fate. Theron, watching from his hillside, felt his heart stop in his chest. He had seen gods before, had glimpsed Athena walking among the olive groves, had once caught sight of Artemis hunting beneath the moon. But this was different. This was the Thunderbringer himself, speaking to something that should not exist. The stranger tilted his head. "Wow, you're strong," he called out. And there was no fear in his voice, no awe, no recognition of the being he addressed. Only genuine excitement, the kind a warrior feels when he encounters someone worth fighting. Really, really strong. What's your name? I'm Goku. Goku. The name meant nothing. It had no root in any language of mortals. It appeared in no prophecy, no ancient text, no whispered secret passed down from the age of gold. It was a sound that had never been spoken in this world until this moment. And yet, and yet the fates heard it. In their cavern beneath the world, where the light of sun and moon had never reached, the three sisters paused in their endless work. Clotho's hand stopped above the spindle. Lachesis looked up from the measuring of threads. Atropos, she who cannot be turned, felt her shears grow heavy in her hand. He is not woven, Clotho whispered, and her voice was the sound of rivers running backward. There is no thread, Lachesis agreed, and her voice was the rustling of pages that had never been written. He should not exist, Atropos said, and for the first time in eternity, her voice held something that might have been uncertainty. Above them, in the world of light, Goku floated above the Aegean Sea and waited for an answer to his question, unaware that he had just become the first being in the history of creation to exist outside the tapestry of fate. On Olympus, Zeus studied the stranger with eyes that had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of civilizations. He saw what the other gods saw: the small stature, the strange clothing, the open expression that held no guile and no fear. But he saw more. He saw power. It did not radiate from the stranger as it radiated from gods. It did not announce itself with thunder or fire or the trembling of the earth. It simply was. A presence that sat within this being like a coiled spring, like a blade waiting to be drawn. Zeus, who had faced the Titans in the war that shaped the cosmos, who had hurled his father into the depths and bound him there for eternity, recognized power when he saw it. This being could fight. I am Zeus, the Thunderbringer answered at last, and his voice carried across the heavens. King of the gods, ruler of Olympus, you stand at the threshold of our home, stranger. Name your purpose. Goku's face lit up with recognition. Zeus! Oh, I've heard of you. Well, sort of. There are stories about gods like you in my world. Not exactly you, but, gods. Thunder and lightning, king of everything. That's so cool. He drifted closer, apparently unconcerned by the fact that he was approaching the seat of divine power. My purpose? I don't really have one. I was just training, and then there was this weird rift, and suddenly I was falling. So I guess my purpose is figuring out where I am, and maybe finding someone strong to fight? Ares laughed, though the sound was harsh. He admits it. He came to challenge us. I didn't say challenge. Goku held up his hands, still smiling. I said fight. There's a difference. A challenge is like, when you want to prove something. A fight is just fighting, for fun, to see who's stronger, to push yourself further. He looked at Ares with genuine curiosity. You're a warrior, right? I can tell. You've got that energy. Want to spar? The silence that followed was absolute. No one, not hero, not monster, not titan, not god, had ever addressed Ares in such a manner, as if he were simply another fighter, another opponent to test oneself against, as if the god of war were a training partner to be approached with a smile and an invitation. Ares' hand tightened on his spear. Father, Athena said quickly, stepping forward before her brother could speak or act. I would speak with the stranger. Zeus nodded, his eyes never leaving Goku's face. Athena descended from Olympus, moving through the air with the grace that marked her as the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. She approached Goku as one approaches an unknown creature, with caution, but also with curiosity. "You say you come from another world," she said. It was not a question. Goku nodded. "Yeah, I think so. The energy here is totally different. Back home we have gods too, but they're different. Some of them are really strong. Some of them are friends of mine." He scratched his head, a gesture so human, so undivine, that Athena found herself momentarily disoriented. "Actually, it's complicated. I'm not really sure how I got here." "And your power," Athena continued, "where does it come from? Which god blessed you? Which prophecy marked you for greatness?" Goku looked confused. "Blessed? Marked? Nobody blessed me. I just trained really hard. My grandpa taught me some stuff when I was little, and then I met this guy Roshi, and then Kami, and then King Kai, and..." He trailed off, seeing the incomprehension on Athena's face. "I trained, a lot, for my whole life. That's where my power comes from." Trained. Athena repeated the word as if it were a foreign concept. "You mean you earned it?" "Yeah, that's how it works, right?" Goku smiled. Some people are born stronger than others, sure. But everyone can get stronger if they work at it. That's the whole point. You fight, you learn, you grow. That's what makes it fun." On Olympus, the gods exchanged glances. "He claims his power is self-made," Apollo murmured. "No divine blessing, no inheritance, no prophecy, just effort." "Impossible," Hera said flatly. "Power is granted or inherited. Those are the only paths." "And yet," Hermes observed, "look at him. Look at how he moves. That is not the awkwardness of a mortal pretending at godhood. That is the comfort of someone who has always been able to fly, always been able to challenge the laws of nature. He is not pretending at power. He simply is." Zeus said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the stranger, and in his mind wheels turned that had not turned since the age of Titans. Below, on the hillside, Theron the shepherd had risen to his feet. He could not hear the words exchanged between the gods and the stranger. That conversation was beyond mortal ears. But he could see, and what he saw would stay with him until his dying day. The stranger who had fallen from the sky was smiling, smiling at gods, smiling at the king of Olympus, smiling as if he had found himself in the most wonderful place imaginable, surrounded by the most interesting people he had ever met. And for the first time in his life, Theron found himself wondering, what must it be like to face the gods without fear? What must it be like to stand before Zeus himself and see not the Thunderbringer, not the King of Heaven, not the wielder of the bolt that shaped the world, but simply another fighter, another opponent, another chance to test oneself? He did not know it, but in that moment, a seed was planted. A seed that would grow into questions that had never been asked in all the ages of mortal existence. Questions about fate, about destiny, about the difference between what was written and what could be achieved. Questions that would, before the sun set on this strange day, begin to shake the foundations of Olympus itself. High above, Goku tilted his head, sensing something he could not quite identify. A presence, vast and ancient, watching from somewhere deep beneath the world. Not hostile exactly, more like curious, concerned, uncertain. He frowned slightly. "Hey, is there someone else? Someone underground? Really deep underground?" Athena's eyes widened. "You can sense Hades?" "Hades? Goku's frown cleared, replaced by interest. So there's another god? A really strong one, by the feel of it. Is he the king of the underworld or something? That's so cool. Do you think he'd want to fight? Hades does not fight, Athena said carefully. He rules. He judges. He maintains the boundary between the living and the dead. He does not descend into the arena for sport. Oh, Goku looked genuinely disappointed for a moment, then brightened. Well, maybe he'd make an exception? I've never met a god of the dead before. It could be interesting. Athena studied him with eyes that had seen countless mortals, countless heroes, countless would-be challengers to the divine order. This being was unlike any she had encountered. He did not seek glory. He did not seek power over others. He did not seek to overthrow or to rule or to reshape the world in his image. He sought growth, challenge, the simple joy of testing his limits against worthy opponents. It was, she realized with a start, the most dangerous thing he could possibly seek. Because the gods of Olympus did not grow. They simply were. They had been crafted at the beginning of things, assigned their domains, granted their powers. Zeus was king because that was his place. Ares was war because that was his nature. Athena was wisdom because that was her inheritance. None of them had earned what they were. None of them had trained for it, struggled for it, bled for it. And here stood a being who had done exactly that, who had taken the raw material of his existence and shaped it through effort and time and sheer stubborn will into something that could stand before gods without flinching. If such a thing was possible, stranger, Athena said, and her voice was softer than before. What is your name again? Goku. He smiled. Son Goku. Well, technically my birth name is Kakarot, but nobody calls me that except my brother when he's being annoying. Goku is fine. Goku. Athena tested the name, felt its strangeness on her tongue. And you truly believe that anyone can become strong through effort? That power is not a matter of birth or blessing, but of training? Goku nodded enthusiastically. Of course. I mean, not everyone can become the strongest. Some people have natural limits, sure. But everyone can get stronger than they are. Everyone can push past what they thought was possible. That's what makes it exciting. You never know how far you can go until you try. He paused, looking at Athena with sudden curiosity. Wait, don't you guys train? You're gods, right? You must have amazing power. But do you ever try to make it even better? Do you ever push yourselves to see how much further you can go? The question hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. In the Hall of the Gods, no one spoke. On his throne of Stormcloud, Zeus felt something stir in his chest, something he had not felt since the days of his youth, when he had first begun to gather allies against his father. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something far more unsettling. It was doubt. Because the stranger's question was valid. The gods did not train. They did not push. They did not seek to grow beyond what they were. Their power was fixed, eternal, unchanging. A gift of birth and inheritance that required no effort to maintain and offered no path to increase. And if this stranger had grown beyond them through nothing but effort, "What are you?" Zeus asked, and his voice rolled across the heavens like thunder before the storm. "What manner of creature are you, who speaks of growth as if it were the most natural thing in the world?" Goku considered the question seriously. "I'm a Saiyan," he said at last, "from a race of warriors. We're born with a love for fighting, and we get stronger every time we push our limits. But honestly, That's not just a Saiyan thing. Anyone who loves fighting, who loves testing themselves, who never gives up, they can grow too. I've seen it happen. Humans, Namekians, even gods. If you want to get stronger, you can. It just takes work. He smiled again, that impossibly genuine smile that held no guile and no fear. So, I guess the real question isn't what I am, it's what you are. What kind of beings are you if you've stopped growing? If you've decided that you're as strong as you'll ever be and that's enough? The question echoed across Olympus, across the heavens, across the world. And deep beneath the earth, in the cavern where the Fates sat frozen at their work, Atropos looked at her sisters and spoke words that had never been spoken in all the ages of creation. What do we do with someone who was never meant to exist? Clotho and Lachesis had no answer. For the first time in eternity, fate itself was uncertain. The sun began to set over the Aegean, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Theron, the shepherd, gathered his flock and began the long walk home, his mind full of wonders he could barely comprehend. Above him, the stranger who called himself Goku still floated in the air, engaged in conversation with gods who had never before spoken to a mortal as an equal. And in the halls of Olympus, the seeds of change had been planted. Change that would grow, change that would spread, change that would, before this strange visitor departed, shake the very foundations of divine order. Because Goku had asked a question that no god could answer. And questions, once asked, have a way of demanding responses. The night that followed Goku's arrival was unlike any night in the memory of Olympus. The gods did not sleep. They had no need of sleep, but they withdrew to their private chambers, to their temples, to the corners of the divine realm where they could think without the pressure of 100 immortal eyes upon them. And they thought. For the first time in millennia, they truly thought about the nature of their existence. In her chamber of olive wood and ancient texts, Athena sat before a brazier whose flames had burned since the founding of Athens. She stared into the fire and saw not the future but the past. Every hero she had guided, every warrior she had blessed, every mortal she had deemed worthy of divine favor. They had all been chosen, selected, marked for greatness by forces beyond their control. But this stranger, this Goku, spoke of a different path. A path where greatness was not granted but achieved, where effort mattered more than birth, where the only limits were the ones you accepted. It was heresy. It was impossible. It was terrifying. Because if it was true, then everything the gods believed about themselves was called into question. If power could be earned through effort, then what gave Zeus the right to rule? What made the gods divine? What separated them from the mortals who toiled below, except the accident of birth? Across the divine realm, in the hall of war, Ares paced like a caged lion. His spear was in his hand, his shield on his arm, his body thrumming with the desire for combat. The stranger had spoken of fighting as if it were a game, a joyful test of strength rather than a sacred duty. He had looked at Ares, the god of war himself, and asked if he wanted to spar. Spar. As if they were children with wooden swords, as if the blood of countless battlefields meant nothing. As if Ares was simply another warrior, another opponent, another chance to grow. The insult burned. But beneath the insult, beneath the rage, there was something else. Something Ares did not want to acknowledge. A whisper of curiosity, a flicker of doubt. What would it be like to fight without purpose, without the weight of divine duty? Simply to fight To push, to see how far one could go? He crushed the thought before it could take root. In the highest tower of Olympus, where the clouds parted to reveal the starry vastness of the cosmos, Zeus stood alone. His lightning bolt rested against the wall. He had not touched it since the stranger's arrival. Instead, he stared out at the night sky and remembered. He remembered the war against the Titans, the endless battles, the desperate struggle, the moment when he had hurled his father into the abyss and claimed his place as king. He remembered the fire in his blood, the certainty of purpose, the knowledge that he was fighting for something greater than himself. When had that fire faded? When had he stopped being a warrior and become simply a ruler? The stranger's question echoed in his mind. What kind of beings are you if you've stopped growing? Zeus had no answer. Dawn broke over the Aegean, painting the sea in shades of rose and gold. And with the dawn came a challenge. Ares stood at the edge of Olympus, his armor gleaming in the first light. His spear pointed toward the place where Goku had spent the night. Floating in the air above the sea, meditating in a posture that seemed utterly alien to the watching gods. Stranger! Ares's voice carried across the heavens like the call of a war trumpet. You spoke of fighting, of sparring, of testing your strength against worthy opponents. I am Ares, god of war. I accept your invitation. Goku's eyes opened. For a moment, there was nothing, just the calm emptiness of deep meditation. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. It was not the smile of someone facing a dangerous opponent. It was the smile of someone who had just been given a wonderful gift. Really? You mean it? He rose to his feet on the air, stretching his arms above his head with a casualness that made Ares's jaw tighten. That's great. I was worried nobody here would want to fight. Where should we do it? Somewhere away from the city, right? We don't want to hurt anyone by accident. Hurt anyone? Ares laughed, and the sound was harsh. You concern yourself with mortals? They are beneath our notice. If they are caught in the crossfire of divine combat, that is their fate. Goku's smile faded slightly. I don't think I like that way of thinking, he said quietly. People shouldn't get hurt just because stronger people are fighting. We can take this somewhere else, somewhere empty. For a long moment, Ares stared at him. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. There is an island to the west, uninhabited, sacred to no god. We will fight there. Perfect, the smile returned. Lead the way. The island was a scar on the face of the world, a place of black rock and twisted stone where even the hardiest plants refused to grow. Ancient legends spoke of it as the site where a titan had fallen during the Great War, his blood poisoning the earth for all time. Whether the legends were true or merely stories, the island served its purpose, a place where violence could unfold without consequence. Ares landed first, his feet touching the black rock with the weight of centuries. He had fought here before, in ages past, against monsters and heroes and the occasional challenger to divine authority. He had always won. He was Ares. He was war incarnate. Defeat was not a concept that applied to him. Goku landed a moment later, his feet bare against the stone. He had removed his strange boots somewhere during the flight, tucking them into his belt with the casualness of someone who had done this 1,000 times. He bounced slightly on the balls of his feet, testing the ground, his eyes bright with anticipation. This place is perfect, he said. Seriously, the energy here is intense, like the earth itself remembers fighting. It does, Ares agreed. A titan died here. His blood soaked into the stone. His rage still lingers. He raised his spear. Are you ready, stranger? Goku settled into a stance, a low, balanced posture that spoke of countless hours of practice. His hands were open, his weight centered, his eyes fixed on Ares with an intensity that had not been there moments before. "I'm ready," he said. "But before we start, what are the rules?" "Rules," Ares laughed. "There are no rules in war." "Okay, but there are rules in fighting." Goku's voice was patient, explanatory. Like, "We're not trying to kill each other, right? This is just to see who's stronger. So if one of us gets knocked out, that's the end. No finishing moves, no killing blows. Deal?" Ares stared at him. In all his centuries of existence, no one had ever proposed such a thing. Combat was combat. It ended in death or surrender, and surrender was rare. "Deal," he said at last, because he wanted to fight, and this strange being was the only worthy opponent he had encountered in millennia. Goku smiled. "Great, okay, you can make the first move." Ares moved. He was fast, faster than any mortal, faster than most gods, faster than anything that had ever walked the earth. His spear stabbed forward with the force of a thunderbolt, aimed at Goku's chest, intending to end this farce before it truly began. Goku was not there. Ares spun, his spear sweeping in a wide arc, and found Goku floating 3 feet to his left, an expression of genuine delight on his face. "Wow, you really are fast. That was incredible. I could barely follow it." The words were sincere. They were admiring. They were the last thing Ares had expected to hear. He attacked again and again and again. His spear became a blur of motion, striking from every angle, seeking gaps in Goku's defense that did not exist. Each time Goku moved, just enough, just barely, his body flowing around the strikes like water around stones. And all the while, he talked. "Your form is amazing. Have you been fighting for thousands of years? That thrust you did there, with the twist at the end. I've never seen anything like it. Oh, that was close. Almost got me that time." Ares felt something building in his chest. It was not anger, or not only anger. It was something stranger, something he had not felt since the earliest days of his existence. It was excitement. This being was not fighting back. He was simply experiencing, absorbing, learning. Every move Ares made was studied, appreciated, understood. And beneath the appreciation, beneath the constant stream of commentary, Ares could sense something else. Goku was enjoying himself, genuinely, completely without reservation. When had Ares last enjoyed combat? When had he last fought for the sheer joy of it, rather than for duty or pride or the satisfaction of dominance? He could not remember. "Fight back!" he roared, his spear slicing through the air where Goku had been a moment before. "Stop dodging and fight!" Goku appeared 10 feet away, tilting his head. "You sure? I was just getting a feel for your style. It's really impressive, you know. The way you move, the way you think. You've been doing this for a long time. I can learn a lot from just watching." "Watching?" Ares' voice cracked with disbelief. "This is combat, not instruction." "For me, they're the same thing." Goku smiled. "Every fight teaches me something. Every opponent shows me something new. That's why I love fighting so much. It's not about winning or losing, it's about growing." He settled back into his stance. "Okay, you want me to fight back? Here I come." He moved. On Olympus, the gods watched. They had gathered in the great hall, where a pool of still water showed them the combat unfolding on the Black Island. They watched in silence as Ares attacked with increasing fury, as the stranger dodged and weaved and commented. They watched as the stranger finally moved forward, and the nature of the battle changed. Goku's first strike was simple. A punch, straight and unadorned, aimed at Ares' chest. Any mortal could have thrown such a punch. Any child could have seen it coming. Ares could not block it. The punch connected with his armored chest, and the god of war flew backward. Not far, only 20 feet or so, but the fact that he flew at all was impossible. His armor was divine, his body was immortal. No mere punch should have moved him. Goku appeared before him, still smiling. "You okay?" "I held back, obviously. Just wanted to see how you'd react." Ares stared at him. The punch had not hurt, not truly, but it had moved him. It had proven that this being could match him, could strike him, could fight as an equal. "Again," Ares said, and his voice was hoarse. He fought. The battle lasted for hours. It ranged across the Black Island, from the twisted cliffs to the ash-choked valleys to the shore where waves crashed against stone that had not felt living water in millennia. Ares used every technique he knew, every trick of warfare learned across centuries of combat. Goku met each one with something new. A block here, a counter there, a dodge that seemed to defy the laws of motion. And through it all, Goku continued to talk, to comment, to praise. "That was brilliant! The way you feinted with the spear and then used your shield. I've never seen that before. Can you show me how you do that spin?" "It looks really useful." Ares found himself responding, found himself explaining, found himself, for the first time in his existence, teaching another being how to fight. It was insane. It was impossible. It was wonderful. When the sun began to set, painting the Black Island in shades of red and gold, they stopped. Both were breathing hard. Ares from exertion, Goku from excitement. They stood facing each other across a field of shattered stone, and for a long moment, neither spoke. "You are," Ares began, and then stopped. He did not know how to finish the sentence. "I had fun." Goku's smile was genuine, warm, without a trace of mockery. "Thank you. Really, I learned a lot." "You learned." Ares repeated the words as if they were in a foreign language. "You fought the god of war, and you learned." "Yeah, that's the best part of fighting, right? Learning new things, getting better." Goku stretched, his joints popping audibly. "You're really strong, Ares. I mean it. If I hadn't been training my whole life, you'd have destroyed me. That move with the spear, the one where you spin it behind your back, I'm definitely going to practice that." Ares looked at his spear, looked at his hands, looked at the stranger who had just spent hours fighting him and emerged with nothing but gratitude and a desire to improve. "You are the strangest being I've ever encountered," he said at last. Goku laughed. "I get that a lot." On Olympus, the watching gods stirred. "That was," Apollo began and trailed off. "Impossible," Hera finished. "Ares fought him for hours. Ares, who has not faced a worthy opponent in centuries. And the stranger did not even attempt to win. He simply absorbed, learned, grew." "He was holding back," Athena said quietly. The other gods turned to look at her. Throughout the entire battle, he was holding back. Did you not see? Every time Ares adapted, the stranger adapted faster. Every time Ares learned something new, the stranger had already learned it and moved beyond. He was not fighting to win. He was fighting to understand. "To what end?" Hermes asked. "What purpose does such understanding serve?" Athena was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft with wonder. To become stronger, to push beyond his limits, to grow into something greater than he was before. She turned to face the other gods. He meant what he said, every word. He fights not for glory, not for dominance, not for any of the reasons we understand. He fights because fighting makes him better, and he believes, truly believes, that anyone can do the same. The implications hung in the air like smoke. If that is true, Zeus said slowly, then everything we are is called into question. Our power, our position, our very divinity, all of it rests on the assumption that we are what we are and cannot become more. That our domains are fixed, our roles eternal. But if a being from beyond fate can grow through effort, through training, through sheer stubborn will, then why can't we? Athena finished. Silence fell over the hall. In the cavern beneath the world, the fates watched through eyes that saw all threads of destiny. They watched the stranger who had no thread. They watched the gods who were beginning to question. They watched the future fracturing into possibilities that had never existed before. He is a contagion, Atropos said, an infection in the order of things. He is a question, Lachesis corrected, a question that has never been asked. He is impossible, Clotho whispered, and yet he exists. The three sisters looked at each other. In all eternity, they had never faced this. Never faced a being outside their domain, outside their power, outside the vast tapestry they had woven since the beginning of time. What do we do? Clotho asked. For the second time in 2 days, they had no answer. On the Black Island, night had fallen. Ares sat on a rock, his spear across his knees, staring at the stars. Goku sat nearby, cross-legged on the stone, his eyes closed in meditation. Why? Ares asked suddenly. Why do you fight? Goku opened his eyes. Because it's fun. Because it makes me stronger. Because there's always someone stronger out there, and I want to meet them, to fight them, to learn from them. He paused. Also, to protect my friends and my family, but that's not really why I love fighting. That's just why I have to win sometimes. Protect. Ares tasted their what? You fight to protect others? Yeah, when I have to, when there's no choice. Goku's voice was calm, matter of fact. But that's different from fighting for fun. When I'm fighting to protect, I can't enjoy it as much. I have to focus on winning no matter what. But when I'm just fighting to fight, he smiled. That's when I really learn. That's when I grow. Ares was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. I have been god of war since the beginning of things, he said. I have fought in countless battles, slain countless enemies, waded through blood and death and glory. And in all that time, I have never once thought of fighting as fun. Really? Goku looked genuinely surprised. That's so sad. Fighting is the best thing in the world. Well, fighting and eating and spending time with my family. But fighting is definitely up there. Ares shook his head. You are impossible. So I've been told. Goku stood, stretching. Thanks again for today. I really mean it. If you ever want to fight again, just let me know. I'd love to see how you've grown. Grown. Ares stood as well, facing the stranger who had turned his understanding of combat upside down. You expect me to grow, to change, to become something other than what I am? Why not? Goku's question was simple, direct, without judgment. You're alive, right? You can learn new things. You can try new techniques. You can push yourself further than you ever have before. That's what living things do. They grow unless they decide to stop. He turned toward the sea, toward the distant glow of Olympus on the horizon. I should probably go back. Your dad, Zeus, I mean, he probably has more questions, and I'd really like to meet that Hades guy, the one underground. His energy is amazing. He leaped into the air, rising effortlessly above the black island. Hey, Ares? He called back. Thanks for being my first real fight here. It meant a lot. And then he was gone, streaking across the sky toward Olympus, leaving the god of war alone on the island where a titan had died. Ares stood there for a long time, staring at the stars, his spear loose in his hand. For the first time in millennia, he was thinking about tomorrow, about what he might learn, about how he might grow. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. On Olympus, Athena watched the strangers approach and felt something she had not felt since she first sprang fully formed from the head of Zeus. Curiosity. Deep, genuine, consuming curiosity. What was this being? Where had he come from? And most importantly, what could the gods learn from him? She descended from the hall to meet him at the gates of Olympus, her gray eyes bright with questions that had no answers. Goku, she said as he landed before her, I would speak with you about training, about growth, about everything you believe. Goku smiled. Sure, I'd love to talk. But first, can we get something to eat? I'm starving. Athena blinked. It was, perhaps, the most mortal thing anyone had ever said to her. Of course, she said after a moment. Follow me. And so the stranger who had no thread walked into the heart of Olympus, surrounded by gods who were beginning to question everything they had ever known. Behind them, in the hall of the gods, Zeus watched and thought and remembered what it felt like to be young, to be hungry, to be curious about the world. He did not like what he was remembering. He did not like it at all. Hashtag segment 3. The feast that Athena prepared was unlike anything Goku had ever experienced. It was not the food, though the ambrosia was unlike anything in his world, and the nectar made his head spin in ways that had nothing to do with alcohol. It was the company. The gods of Olympus, beings of immense power and ancient wisdom, gathered around him as if he were a curiosity, a puzzle to be solved, a threat to be evaluated. They asked questions, endless questions. Where did you come from? A world called Earth, but also a world called Vegeta, but also a place called Otherworld, and it was complicated. How did you get your power? He trained, he fought, he died a few times, which helped because he could train in the afterlife and then come back stronger. The gods exchanged glances at that. Who was the strongest being you ever faced? There was this guy named Beerus, who was a god of destruction, and honestly, Goku still wasn't sure he could beat him. And there was Jiren, who was just incredibly strong through pure training. And there was Frieza, who Goku had beaten eventually, but only after a really long fight. What is a god of destruction? That was hard to explain. A being who destroyed worlds? Who maintained balance by ending things? The gods shifted uncomfortably. Through it all, Goku ate and talked and smiled, completely unaware of the philosophical earthquake he was causing. To him, this was just conversation, just sharing stories, just the normal give and take of beings who loved to fight and wanted to understand each other. To the gods, it was a revelation. He speaks of death as if it were merely inconvenient, Apollo murmured to Artemis. He has died, multiple times, and simply returned. The underworld is not a place one simply leaves. Artemis replied, her voice low. Hades does not release souls. The fates do not reweave threads that have been cut. And yet, Apollo gestured at Goku, who was enthusiastically describing his training with King Kai. And yet, in her seat at the far end of the table, Athena listened and watched and thought. The patterns were becoming clear to her. The way Goku's power worked, the philosophy behind his endless growth, the fundamental assumptions that guided his life. He believed in effort, in the power of trying, in the possibility of surpassing any limit through sheer determination and hard work. It was, she realized, the most radical idea she had ever encountered. Because if effort could surpass any limit, then what were limits for? What was the purpose of boundaries, of domains, of the careful hierarchy that had governed existence since the beginning of time? If a being could simply train hard enough to challenge a god, then what made gods divine? She opened her mouth to ask, to truly ask, to probe the depths of this impossible philosophy. But before she could speak, the air changed. The temperature dropped, the light dimmed. The very fabric of reality seemed to shudder, and Zeus rose from his throne. Enough! The word rolled through the hall like thunder, like the closing of a tomb, like the final judgment of a being who had never been questioned. The other gods fell silent, the feast forgotten. All eyes turned to the king of Olympus. Goku looked up from a plate of something that might have been roast boar, his expression curious rather than afraid. Something wrong? You come here from beyond the edge of fate, Zeus said, his voice building in power with each word. You speak of worlds where gods can be challenged, where death is merely inconvenient, where the order of things means nothing. You fight my son, the god of war, and instead of destroying him, you teach him. Instead of claiming victory, you offer friendship. Is that bad? Goku asked. I mean, Ares is really strong. It would be a waste not to be friends with someone that strong. Zeus descended from his throne, step by measured step. Lightning flickered at the edges of his form, and the air grew heavy with the pressure of divine power held barely in check. You do not understand what you have done, Zeus said. You do not understand the nature of this world. Here, order is not a suggestion. It is not something to be overcome through effort or determination. Order is the foundation upon which existence rests. The fates weave. The gods rule. Mortals live and die within the bounds assigned to them. This is how it has always been. This is how it must always be. Sounds boring, Goku said, and the hall went deathly still. Zeus stopped walking. For a long, terrible moment, he simply looked at the stranger who had dared to call the divine order boring. Then he laughed. It was not a pleasant laugh. It was the laugh of a storm contemplating destruction, of a king considering whether to annihilate a challenger. It rolled through the hall like thunder, shaking the foundations of Olympus itself. You find the order of existence boring? Zeus asked, and his voice was mild, almost conversational. You, who have been in this world for less than 2 days, find the system that has governed reality since before the first mortal drew breath. Tedious? Goku shrugged. I didn't say tedious. I said boring. There's a difference. Tedious is when something goes on too long. Boring is when nothing ever changes. He met Zeus's eyes without flinching. In my world, things change all the time. People get stronger. New enemies appear. Friends become rivals. Rivals become friends. There's always something new to learn, someone new to fight, some new limit to push past. That's what makes it exciting. And you think, Zeus said softly, that this world lacks excitement? I think, Goku replied, that you've stopped growing. All of you. You've been the same for thousands of years. Same power, same roles, same everything. How is that not boring? The question hung in the air like a blade. Athena watched her father's face and saw something she had never seen before. Uncertainty. Zeus, the Thunderbringer, the king of gods, the being who had cast his own father into the abyss. Uncertain. Because the stranger was right. They had stopped growing. They had stopped changing. They had become static, eternal, unchanging. And in that stillness, they had lost something essential, something this strange being from beyond fate possessed in abundance. The joy of becoming. You speak of things you do not understand, Zeus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then help me understand. Goku stood, setting aside his plate. Show me. Fight me. Not to win, not to prove anything, just fight. Let me feel what it's like to face the king of the gods. And maybe, while we fight, you'll remember what it felt like to be alive. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Zeus smiled, and it was the smile of the sky before the storm, of the thunder before the lightning, of the power that had shaped the world. Very well, he said. Let us go somewhere we will not shatter reality by accident. They chose the void beyond creation. It was a place the gods rarely visited, a realm of absolute nothingness that bordered the edges of existence. Here there was no earth to crack, no sea to boil, no sky to tear. Here the full power of divine combat could be unleashed without consequence. Zeus floated in the darkness, his form wreathed in lightning, his eyes burning with the fire of ages. Across from him, Goku hovered with the casual ease of one who had spent his entire life in the air. This place is amazing, Goku said, looking around at the nothingness. It's like the world before the world existed. So much potential. It is the absence of potential, Zeus corrected. It is what remains when everything that can exist has been created. A void, an ending. Goku shook his head. No, potential is everywhere, even here, even now. You just have to look for it. He settled into his stance, the same stance he had used against Ares, but different now. Tighter, more focused. The stance of someone who recognized that this opponent was unlike any he had faced before. Ready when you are. Zeus raised his hand, and the lightning came. It was not lightning as mortals understood it. It was not a bolt from the sky, not a flash of light followed by thunder. It was lightning in its purest form, the raw essence of the storm, the power that had shaped mountains and carved valleys, the force that had cast the titans into the abyss. It struck Goku before he could move. For a moment he was simply there, enveloped in divine fire, his form silhouetted against the blinding light. The gods watching from Olympus held their breath. No mortal could survive such a strike. No demigod, no being that had not been born of the primal forces of creation. Then the light faded, and Goku was still there, smoking slightly, his clothing charred at the edges, but standing, smiling. That, he said, was incredible. I've been hit by lightning before, but nothing like that. The way it keeps going, keeps building. It's like the storm itself is alive. Zeus stared at him. The bolt should have annihilated him, should have sent his essence scattering across the void. Should have proven once and for all that this stranger was no match for the king of the gods. Instead, Goku was praising him. Again? Goku asked. I want to feel that again. I think I can learn from it. Zeus attacked. The battle that followed would have shattered the world if it had occurred within its bounds. Zeus called upon powers he had not used since the Titanomachy, storms that could swallow continents, lightning that could pierce the heart of stars, thunder that could shake the foundations of reality itself. He fought with the fury of a god who had forgotten what it meant to struggle, to push, to reach beyond his limits. And Goku adapted. Each strike taught him something. Each blast of lightning revealed some new aspect of divine power. Each moment of combat added to his understanding, his technique, his strength. He did not simply endure Zeus's attacks. He absorbed them, learned from them, grew because of them. "You are impossible," Zeus roared, hurling a bolt that could have split the world in two. Goku dodged it by inches, then appeared before him, fist extended. The punch caught Zeus in the chest and sent him tumbling through the void. For a moment, there was silence. The gods watching from Olympus could not breathe. Their king, their eternal, unchanging, all-powerful king, had been struck, had been moved, had been forced to feel something he had not felt since the dawn of creation. Pain. Zeus stopped his tumble, his eyes wide. He looked down at his chest, where a faint bruise was already forming. A bruise on the body of a god. From a punch. "How?" he whispered. Goku floated before him, breathing hard but still smiling. "You're really strong," he said. "Stronger than almost anyone I've ever fought. But you've been holding back. Your whole life, you've been holding back." "I have not." "You have." Goku's voice was gentle, without judgment. "You've never pushed yourself. Never really tried to be more than you already are. You've been content to be the king, to be the strongest, to be the one everyone else fears. But you've never asked yourself, what if I could be more? What if I could grow?" Zeus stared at him. The words should have been blasphemy, should have been impossible, should have been the ravings of a madman. Instead, they were truth. "When was the last time you really fought?" Goku asked. "Not commanded, not judged, not ruled, fought. When was the last time you put everything on the line, pushed yourself to the absolute limit, and saw what happened next?" Zeus had no answer. "I'm gonna show you," Goku said. "I'm gonna show you what it feels like to really fight, to really push, to really grow. And maybe you'll remember what you've been missing." He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something had changed. The air around him, if there could be air in this void, began to shimmer. His hair, already strange, began to rise, to shift, to take on a golden hue that had no place in this darkness. His eyes, dark and curious, began to glow with a light that was not divine, not mortal, but something else entirely. "What?" Zeus began. "This is what I learned," Goku said, and his voice was deeper now, resonating with power that had not been there moments before. "This is what happens when you push past your limits, when you refuse to accept that you are as strong as you'll ever be. This is Super Saiyan." The golden light erupted from him like a star being born. Zeus raised his hands to shield his eyes, and for the first time since the age of Titans, he felt something he had thought long dead within him. Fear. And beneath the fear, something else. Something that had been buried beneath millennia of rule, of judgment, of static eternity. Excitement. The battle resumed, but it was not the same. Goku moved with speed that Zeus could barely follow, not because Zeus was slow, but because Goku's speed was constantly increasing, constantly adapting, constantly reaching new heights. Each exchange taught him something. Each moment of combat pushed him further. He was not fighting to win, he was fighting to become. And Zeus, despite himself, began to respond. For the first time in thousands of years, he stopped thinking like a king and started thinking like a warrior. He stopped holding back. He stopped restraining his power for fear of what it might do. He simply fought. Lightning filled the void. Thunder rolled across nothingness. Two beings, one divine and one impossible, clashed with a fury that would have shattered worlds. And in the midst of it all, Goku was laughing. Not mocking, not triumphant, just joyful. The laughter of someone doing exactly what they were born to do, pushing themselves exactly as far as they could go, experiencing exactly what it meant to be alive. Zeus heard that laughter and felt something crack inside him. Something ancient. Something that had been frozen for so long he had forgotten it existed. He laughed too. It was a rusty sound, unpracticed, uncertain. But it was laughter. The king of the gods, the thunderbringer, the ruler of Olympus, laughing in the middle of combat, overwhelmed by the sheer joy of fighting. The battle continued. On Olympus, the gods watched in stunned silence. "He's matching Father," Apollo breathed. "Not just matching, pushing him, making him better." "He's teaching him," Athena said softly. "Teaching him how to fight again, how to grow, how to be alive." Ares stood apart from the others, his hand on his spear, his eyes fixed on the golden figure in the void. He understood now, understood what Goku had been trying to show him during their fight on the Black Island. Understood that combat was not about victory or defeat, not about glory or dominance, but about something far more fundamental. It was about becoming, about pushing past what you were into what you could be, about embracing the endless potential of existence, about refusing to accept that you had reached the end of your journey. "You were right," he whispered to the image of Goku. "You were right about everything." In the void, the battle reached its peak. Zeus gathered all his power, every ounce of divine might, every spark of lightning, every echo of thunder that had ever shaken the world. He shaped it into a single bolt, a spear of pure destruction, and hurled it at the golden warrior who had reminded him what it meant to fight. Goku met it with a fist. For a moment, light and darkness coexisted in impossible union. The void itself seemed to tremble, to question its own nature, to wonder if perhaps it too could become something more. Then the light faded and they stood facing each other, two warriors breathing hard, eyes locked. "You could have won," Zeus said. "It was not a question." "I wasn't trying to win." Goku smiled and the golden light faded from his hair and eyes, leaving him once again the simple stranger who had fallen through a tear in reality. "I was trying to show you something. You succeeded." Zeus looked at his hands, hands that had not known effort in millennia, hands that now bore the small marks of combat. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to struggle, to push, to reach for something beyond myself." He looked up, and for the first time since the dawn of creation, the king of the gods looked at another being with something like respect. "Thank you." Goku shrugged, embarrassed. "It was nothing, really. You did most of the work. I just reminded you." Zeus nodded slowly. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "I believe," he said, "that we have much to discuss, you and perhaps the other gods as well. This world of yours, this place where growth is possible, where limits are meant to be surpassed. I would understand it better." Sure. Goku's face lit up. But first, can we get something to eat? Fighting really works up an appetite. Zeus laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised. Indeed. Come, let us return to Olympus. We have much to discuss, and I find myself hungry. They turned together toward the distant light of existence, two warriors who had found something unexpected in each other. Behind them, in the void, something stirred. The fates had been watching, had seen everything, had felt the tremors of a battle that should not have been possible, between beings who should not have been able to change. And they were afraid. Because if a god could grow, could truly grow, could change from what he was into something more, then what was fate? What was destiny? What was the point of weaving threads that could be broken, rewritten, transcended? He must be stopped, Atropos said. He cannot be stopped, Lachesis replied. He has no thread. We cannot touch what we cannot see. Then we must find another way. Clotho's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of eternity. We must remind the gods why order exists, why fate is necessary, why some things must not change. The sisters looked at each other. The underworld, Lachesis said slowly. Hades. He understands. He has always understood. If anyone can make this stranger see the danger he represents. Hades, Atropos agreed. Send him to Hades. And so it was decided. When Goku and Zeus returned to Olympus, they found the hall in chaos. Gods arguing, shouting, pointing at the sky where something was forming. A darkness, a shadow, a presence that should not have been able to manifest in the realm of light. What is that? Goku asked. Athena appeared at his side, her gray eyes wide with an emotion he had not seen in her before. The fates, she whispered. They're intervening. The darkness coalesced into a figure, tall, crowned, wreathed in shadows that drank the light. Hades, Lord of the underworld, stood before them with eyes that held the weight of every soul who had ever died. Stranger, he said, and his voice was the silence of tombs, the finality of endings. We must speak. Goku tilted his head, curious rather than afraid. You're Hades, right? The god of the underworld? Your energy is amazing, so deep, so final. And you, Hades replied, are a problem, a contradiction, an impossibility that threatens the very foundation of existence. He extended a hand. Come with me, there is something you must see. Something that will make you understand why this world cannot accommodate beings like you. Goku looked at the offered hand, looked at Hades's ancient, solemn face, looked back at Zeus, at Athena, at the gods who had become his unlikely friends. Will I be able to come back? He asked. Hades was silent for a long moment. That, he said at last, depends on what you learn. Goku smiled. Then let's go. I've always wanted to see the underworld. He took Hades' hand, and the darkness swallowed them both. In the Hall of the Gods, silence reigned. What just happened? Ares demanded. Athena stared at the space where Goku had stood. The fates, she said slowly. They're trying to stop him, to show him something that will make him leave or make him understand why he cannot stay. Will it work? Apollo asked. Athena shook her head. I don't know. He is unlike anything we have ever encountered. He may see what they show him and simply refuse to accept it. Zeus stepped forward, his eyes still carrying the light of their battle. Then we wait, and we hope that whatever the fates have planned, it does not destroy him. He paused, because I would very much like to fight him again. It was, perhaps, the most human thing the king of the gods had ever said. And in the underworld, in the realm of death and shadow, Goku was about to learn the true weight of fate. Hashtag Segment 4. The descent into the underworld was unlike anything Goku had experienced. He had been to other realms before, other world, where the dead trained and the gods watched over the cosmos. He had traveled through dimensions, crossed boundaries between life and death, walked paths that should not exist. But this was different. This was the underworld of Greek myth, a place not of waiting or training or judgment, but of finality, of endings that truly ended, of souls that would never return to the light. Hades led him through the gates with no words, his presence a constant weight of shadow and silence. Around them, the dead drifted like mist, shades of mortals who had lived and died and now existed only as memories, as echoes, as threads in a tapestry they could no longer affect. "They cannot see you," Hades said, his voice carrying no emotion. "You are not dead, not truly. You exist in a space between alive but walking among the departed. They sense something, perhaps, a warmth they have forgotten, but they cannot grasp it." Goku watched the shades pass, his expression thoughtful. "They seem so sad. They are dead. Sadness is the least of what they have lost." Hades paused, turning to face him. "Do you understand yet? The weight of this place? The finality of what it represents?" "I understand that people die," Goku said quietly. "I've died, more than once, but I always came back. These souls," he looked at the drifting shades, "they won't. No, they will not. Because death here is not a transition. It is an ending. The thread is cut, and there is no power in existence, divine or mortal, that can reweave it." Hades studied him with eyes that held the darkness of eternity. "You are a disruption, stranger, a being who should not exist, bringing ideas that cannot be allowed to spread." "What ideas?" Goku asked. "That people can grow? That limits can be pushed? That's not dangerous. That's just true. In your world, perhaps, in your reality, where death is temporary and growth is infinite. But here, Hades gestured at the shades, at the endless river of souls flowing toward whatever fate awaited them. Here, growth is limited by design. Here, mortals have boundaries for a reason. If they believed they could become more, if they truly believed they could challenge the gods, could change their fates, could escape the threads woven for them, they would destroy themselves. They would reach for power they cannot control and be consumed by it. Goku frowned. "That sounds like you don't trust them, like you think they're too weak to handle the truth." "I think," Hades said slowly, "that I have watched mortals for longer than your world has existed. I have seen their hopes, their dreams, their endless striving. And I have seen them fall again and again and again. The boundaries exist for a reason. Fate exists for a reason. Not to limit them, but to protect them. Protect them from what? From themselves." Hades turned and began walking again, leading Goku deeper into the underworld. "Come, there is someone you should meet, someone who understands the danger of your philosophy better than anyone." They walked through realms of shadow and memory, past the judges of the dead who watched with empty eyes, past the fields where heroes trained for eternity, past the gates of Tartarus, where the imprisoned titans howled in endless agony. Finally, they came to a place apart, a cliff overlooking the river of souls, where a single figure sat in chains. He was ancient, this being, ancient in ways that even Hades was not. His face bore the marks of suffering, of endurance, of punishment that had lasted longer than most civilizations. But his eyes burned with a fire that had not dimmed in all the eons of his torment. "Prometheus," Hades said, "I bring a visitor." The chained figure turned and his gaze fell upon Goku. For a long moment he simply looked with an intensity that seemed to pierce through flesh and bone and into the very essence of the being before him. "Ah," he said at last, and his voice was the sound of fire, of rebellion, of hope that refused to die. "You, I have heard whispers even here. The being without a thread, the one who grows through effort, the one who challenges fate itself." He smiled, and it was a terrible, wonderful smile. "I have waited a long time to meet someone like you." Goku approached, his eyes wide with curiosity. "You're Prometheus? The one who gave fire to humans?" "The same." Prometheus rattled his chains, but there was no bitterness in the gesture, only a kind of weary acceptance. "For my crime of sharing divine fire with mortals, I have been chained to this rock for eternity. Each day an eagle comes to tear out my liver. Each night it grows back. The pain is infinite. The punishment never ends." He looked at Goku. "And yet, if I had the chance, I would do it again." "Why?" Goku asked. "Because they deserved it. Because the fire, real fire, not just the flame that cooks food and warms homes, but the fire of knowledge, of possibility, of growth, that fire was their birthright. The gods hoarded it, kept it for themselves, used it to maintain their power over mortals. I simply shared." Hades spoke from behind them, his voice heavy with ancient judgment. "You disrupted the natural order. You gave mortals tools they were not ready to wield. And because of you, they suffered. They reached too far, too fast, and they fell. The fire you gave them burned." "Better to burn than to never be warm," Prometheus replied. "Better to reach and fail than to never reach at all." He looked at Goku again. "You understand, don't you? You felt it, the hunger, the need to push further, to become more, to see what lies beyond the next limit." Goku nodded slowly. "Yeah, I have. My whole life. And has it ever gone wrong? Has your reaching ever led to suffering?" Goku was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "Yes, sometimes. There have been enemies I couldn't beat, people I couldn't save. There have been times when my love of fighting put others in danger. There have been moments when I wished I was weaker, so I wouldn't have to carry the weight of being strong." Prometheus nodded, unsurprised. "And yet you continue. You still reach. You still push." "Because the alternative is worse." Goku's voice grew stronger. "If I stop growing, if I stop trying to be better, then the next time someone needs help, I won't be able to give it. The next time there's a threat, I won't be strong enough to stop it. I don't grow for myself, not really. I grow so I can protect the people I love." "And that," Prometheus said softly, "is the difference between you and the gods. They hoard their power. They maintain their positions. They guard their thrones against any who might challenge them. But you grow so you can give, so you can protect, so you can share the fire." He looked past Goku, toward Hades, toward the endless darkness of the underworld. "That is what they fear, you know. Not your power, not your growth, not even your defiance of fate. What they fear is that you will teach mortals to be like you, that you will give them the fire, the real fire, and they will use it to become something the gods cannot control." Hades said nothing. His face was carved from shadow, unreadable. Is that true? Goku asked him. Is that what you're afraid of? Hades was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, almost, almost human. I'm afraid of what I have seen, he said. I have watched mortals for eternity. I have seen their capacity for destruction, for cruelty, for self-annihilation. I have seen them take gifts and turn them into weapons. I have seen hope become despair, ambition become tyranny, love become obsession. If they had your power, your ability to grow without limit, what would they become? Goku considered the question seriously. Some of them would become monsters, he admitted. Some of them would use it for terrible things. But some of them, most of them, would use it to help others, to protect their families, to build something better. He paused. That's what my friends do. That's what my family does. They're not gods. They're not perfect, but they're good, and they keep getting better. In your world, Hades said, not in mine. Maybe it's time for that to change. The words hung in the air between them, simple and world-shaking. Prometheus laughed, a sound of pure joy, of hope long deferred suddenly realized. He understands, he said to Hades. He understands what I tried to teach, what I was punished for teaching. That growth is not a threat, that change is not destruction, that mortals can be trusted with fire if someone shows them how to use it. Hades looked at Goku with those ancient, shadowed eyes. And you would be that someone? You would stay in this world, teach these mortals, watch over them as they reach for power they may not be ready to wield? Goku shook his head. No, I can't stay. I have my own world, my own family, my own friends. They need me. He looked at Prometheus, at the chains that bound him, at the endless suffering written into every line of his face. But maybe I don't have to stay to help. Maybe just being here, just showing what's possible, is enough. Prometheus nodded slowly. The seed has been planted. The fire has been shared. Even if you leave, even if the fates try to erase your memory, something will remain. The mortals who saw you, the gods who fought you, they will remember. They will wonder. And some of them, maybe only a few, but some, will begin to reach. Is that enough? Goku asked. It is everything. They left Prometheus to his chains, to his eternal torment, to the hope that had been rekindled in his ancient heart. Hades led Goku through the underworld in silence, each lost in thought, each contemplating the weight of what had been said. Finally, they came to a place that was not a place, a cavern that existed outside the normal boundaries of the underworld, where three figures sat at an impossible loom, weaving threads of light that stretched into infinity. The Fates. Clotho spun, Lachesis measured, Atropos cut, and all three paused as Goku entered. You should not be here, Atropos said, her voice the sound of shears closing. You cannot be here, Lachesis agreed, her voice the whisper of measured thread. You are not woven, Clotho finished, her voice the sigh of possibility denied. Goku looked at them with calm curiosity. So I've heard, but here I am. The Fates exchanged glances. It was the first time in eternity that they had encountered a being they could not account for, could not predict, could not control. We cannot weave you, Clotho said. When we try to spin your thread, the spindle breaks. We cannot measure you, Lachesis added. When we try to find your place in the tapestry, the threads tangle. We cannot cut you, Atropos finished. When we try to end you, the shears grow dull. Goku tilted his head. So what does that mean? It means, Hades said from behind him, that you are outside fate, outside destiny, outside everything that gives this world order. You are a variable that cannot be calculated, a possibility that cannot be predicted, a being who exists in a state of pure potential. Is that bad? The fates looked at each other again. For the first time in eternity, they had no answer. We do not know, Clotho admitted. You are unprecedented. You are dangerous, Atropos said, not because of what you are, but because of what you represent. You are hope, Lachesis added, and there was something like wonder in her ancient voice. Hope that the threads can be changed. Hope that fate is not absolute. Hope that even the most fixed destinies can be rewritten. Goku smiled. That sounds like a good thing. Perhaps. Hades stepped forward, his shadowed face unreadable. But hope is also dangerous. Hope led Prometheus to steal fire. Hope led mortals to reach beyond their grasp. Hope has caused as much suffering as it has prevented. And yet, Goku replied, without hope, there's no reason to do anything, no reason to grow, no reason to fight, no reason to protect the people you love. He looked at the fates, at their infinite tapestry, at the billions of threads stretching into eternity. You've woven all of this, every life, every death, every moment. But have you ever wondered what happens when someone decides to weave their own thread? The question hung in the air like thunder before the storm. We are the weavers, Atropos said. There is no other. Maybe there doesn't have to be. Goku turned away from them, toward the exit from this impossible place. Maybe the point isn't to have one weaver. Maybe the point is that everyone weaves their own thread, together. He walked toward the light, the faint, distant light that marked the boundary between the underworld and the world above. Thank you for showing me this, he said without turning. I understand now why this world is the way it is, why fate matters, why the gods are afraid. He paused, but I still think they're wrong, and I think someday they'll realize it too. He stepped into the light and was gone. The fates sat in silence, their work forgotten. He cannot be allowed to leave, Atropos said finally. If he returns to the surface, if he speaks to the mortals, if he spreads his ideas. He has already spread them, Lachesis replied. Ares fights differently now. Zeus questions his own nature. Athena contemplates possibilities that never existed before. The damage is done. Then we must undo it. Clotho's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of desperation. We must restore order. We must remind the gods why fate exists. We must... She stopped because for the first time in eternity, she had no idea what to do. Hades watched them with ancient, knowing eyes. You cannot stop him, he said quietly. You cannot weave him. You cannot measure him. You cannot cut him. He is beyond you, beyond all of us. He turned toward the light where Goku had disappeared. The only question now is, what will the gods do with what he has shown them? He left the fates to their silence, to their broken loom, to the first uncertainty they had ever known. And above, in the world of light, Goku emerged from the underworld to find the gods waiting for him. They gathered on the slopes of Olympus, Zeus, Athena, Ares, Apollo, Artemis, Hermes, even Hera, who had been so skeptical. They stood in a loose circle, watching him emerge from the shadows with expressions that ranged from curiosity to fear to wonder. You returned, Athena said. It was not a question. I said I would. Goku smiled. The underworld is amazing. Really. So much depth, so much weight. Hades is incredible, and Prometheus, he shook his head. He's suffering so much, but he hasn't given up. He still believes. Believes in what? Zeus asked. In people, in mortals, in the fire he gave them. Goku looked at the king of the gods. He said something that made me think. He said the gods hoard their power because they're afraid. Afraid that if mortals had what they have, they'd become monsters. But that's not the only possibility. Some of them, maybe most of them, would become something beautiful. Zeus was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Perhaps, he said, perhaps that is true. But the risk, there's always risk. Goku's voice was gentle. Every time you fight, there's risk. Every time you grow, there's risk. Every time you care about someone, there's risk. That's what makes it worthwhile. He looked at them, these ancient beings, these gods who had ruled since the beginning of time, these immortals who had never truly lived. I have to go soon, he said. The rift that brought me here, it's closing. I can feel it. If I don't leave within the next day, I might be stuck here forever. And would that be so terrible? Athena asked. To stay? To continue teaching us? Goku shook his head. I have people who need me, a family, friends, a world that depends on me. I can't abandon them, even for a place as amazing as this. He smiled. But I'll never forget this, any of it. You've taught me so much about fate, about order, about the weight of eternity. I'm stronger than when I arrived, and that's the best gift anyone could give me. The gods exchanged glances. Something passed between them. An understanding, a decision, a choice. Before you go, Zeus said, there is one more thing, one more confrontation. The fates have decided that you cannot be allowed to leave without consequences. Goku's expression didn't change. What kind of consequences? The kind that test whether you truly believe what you say. Zeus stepped forward, his eyes holding the light of storms. The kind that determine whether your philosophy can survive when everything is against you. The kind that will decide, once and for all, whether effort truly can overcome fate. He raised his hand, and the sky began to darken. The fates are unraveling part of reality, he said, creating a space where their power is absolute. They want to see if you can survive in a world where they control everything, where your growth means nothing, where your effort is meaningless. Goku looked at the darkening sky, at the threads of fate becoming visible in the air, at the loom of reality beginning to fray. Will you come with me? He asked. Zeus shook his head. We cannot. The fates are beyond us, beyond all gods. If we enter their domain, we become as mortal as any human. We lose our power, our immortality, everything. Then I'll go alone. Goku stepped forward, toward the darkness, toward the unraveling. Thank you for everything, for the fights, for the food, for the lessons. It meant more than you know. Wait. Ares stepped forward, his spear in his hand. Take this. Goku looked at the spear, the divine weapon of the god of war. I can't. It's yours. It was mine. Ares pressed it into his hands. Now it's yours, a symbol, a reminder. When you face the fates, when you fight in their domain, remember, you are not alone. You carry a piece of Olympus with you, a piece of war, a piece of growth, a piece of everything we've learned from you. Goku looked at the spear, felt its weight, felt the centuries of combat embedded in its divine metal. Thank you, he said softly. I'll bring it back. Bring yourself back, Ares replied. That's all that matters. Goku smiled, nodded, and turned toward the darkness. And as he walked into the unraveling, into the domain of the fates, into the ultimate test of everything he believed, The gods of Olympus watched and wondered and hoped that a being without a thread could teach even fate itself to grow. Hashtag segment 5. The domain of the fates was not a place. It was an idea given form, the concept of predestination made manifest, the weight of every thread that had ever been woven pressing down from every direction. Goku entered it as one enters a storm, aware that he was out of his element, but unwilling to turn back. The darkness surrounded him, but it was not empty. Threads hung in the air like spider silk, stretching into infinity in every direction. Each thread glowed with its own light, the light of a life, a destiny, a story that had been written before its first page was turned. And at the center of it all, the three sisters sat at their impossible loom, weaving eternity. "You came," Atropos said. It was not surprise in her voice, nothing so human, but something like acknowledgement. "I said I would." Goku walked forward, the spear of Ares held loosely in his hand. "You wanted to test me, to see if I could survive in a world where fate is absolute. Here I am." Clotho looked up from her spinning. "You do not understand what you have walked into. This is not a place where effort matters. This is not a place where growth is possible. This is the heart of destiny itself. Here, everything that happens has already been written. Every move you make, every word you speak, every thought you think, all of it was determined before you arrived." Goku considered this. "Then why are you afraid?" The fates went still. "I can feel it," he continued. "The fear, the uncertainty. You've never faced anyone like me before. You don't know what's going to happen. Your threads don't work on me. Your destiny doesn't apply. For the first time in eternity, you're facing something you can't predict." He smiled. "That must be terrifying." Lachesis stood, her measured voice carrying the weight of ages. "We are not afraid. We are the fates. We are the weavers of destiny. Nothing exists outside our power. I exist." Goku's voice was calm, certain. "And you can't touch me." The loom shuddered. Atropos raised her shears, and the threads around them began to move, not randomly, but with purpose, with intent, with the weight of billions of destinies pressing toward a single point. "Then we will unmake the world around you," she said. "We will strip away everything that gives you power. We will leave you alone in the darkness with nothing to fight, nothing to grow from, nothing to become." The threads converged, and Goku vanished. He fell through nothing. Not through space, not through time, not through any dimension he had ever experienced. He fell through the absence of everything. No light, no sound, no sensation, no possibility. Just emptiness, just void, just the absolute certainty that nothing existed and nothing ever would. For a long moment, or perhaps an eternity, he simply fell. Then, slowly, he stopped falling. He hung in the void, alone, with nothing to push against, nothing to fight, nothing to learn from. The fates had done exactly what they promised. They had stripped away everything that gave him power. No opponents, no challenges, no limits to push past. Just nothing. And in that nothing, Goku did something unexpected. He laughed. It was not a mocking laugh, and not a desperate laugh, not the laugh of someone who had lost their mind. It was genuine amusement, the laughter of someone who had just realized something wonderful. "You think this will stop me?" he called out into the void. "You think taking away my opponents will make me stop growing?" Silence. "Because here's the thing you don't understand." He floated in the darkness, alone and unafraid. I don't need opponents to grow. I don't need fights to push past my limits. The greatest battles I've ever fought were against myself, against my own doubts, against my own fears, against the voice that said I couldn't do something. He closed his eyes. When I first learned to fly, I had no teacher. I just figured it out. When I first became a super Saiyan, it wasn't because someone pushed me to it. It was because I refused to give up, because I looked at my limits and said, not today. He opened his eyes and they were glowing. You can take away my opponents. You can take away my challenges. You can leave me in absolute nothing for eternity, and I will still grow. Because growth isn't something that happens to me. It's something I do. It's something I choose. Every single day for my entire life, I have chosen to become more than I was before. And nothing, not you, not fate, not the entire weight of destiny can take that choice away from me. The void trembled, not with fear, not yet, but with something that had never existed in the domain of the fates before: uncertainty. In the heart of their domain, the three sisters watched the impossible being who refused to be diminished. He's still growing, Clotho whispered, even here, even now. I can see it. Not a thread, not a destiny, but something else, something new. It's not possible, Lachesis said. There's nothing here to grow from, no challenge, no opposition, no source of power. And yet, Atropos pointed with her shears. Look! In the void, Goku was changing. His hair, already strange, began to shift, not to the gold of Super Saiyan, but to something else. Something that had never existed before. A light that was not light. A power that was not power. A presence that seemed to draw strength from the very absence of strength. What is he doing? Lachesis demanded. He's creating, Clotho breathed, creating something from nothing, making a new form, a new power, a new possibility. Simply because he refuses to accept that there is nothing to work with. The fates watched in wonder and horror as Goku transformed before their eyes. It was not like the transformations they had witnessed before. Those had been responses to external pressure, reactions to threat, to rage, to desperation. This was different. This was pure creation. This was a being looking at absolute emptiness and saying, there is potential here. I just have to find it. And he did. The form that emerged from the void was unlike anything in the history of either world. It was golden, but not the gold of Super Saiyan. It was white, but not the white of divine light. It was the color of possibility, of potential, of everything that had never been tried. His eyes held the fire of countless battles, and his stance held the certainty of someone who had just proven that limits were lies. What do you call this form? Atropos asked, and her voice held something new, something that might have been respect. Goku considered the question. I don't know yet. It's new, it's mine. It's what happens when you refuse to accept that nothing can become something. He smiled. Maybe I'll call it Ultra Instinct. No, that's taken. Maybe Limit Breaker. Yeah, Limit Breaker. Because that's what I do. I break limits, even the limit of having nothing to break. He raised his hand, and the void began to fill with light. The fates watched as their domain, their perfect, ordered, eternal domain, began to change. Threads that had hung unmoving for eternity began to shift. New patterns emerged where no patterns had existed before. Possibilities bloomed like flowers in a desert, like stars being born in empty space. You're rewriting fate, Lachesis said, and her voice was strange, not angry, not afraid, but wondering. No, Goku shook his head. I'm not rewriting anything. I'm just showing that it can be written differently, that the threads don't have to be fixed, that every moment is a chance to choose something new. He looked at them, these ancient beings, these weavers of destiny, these sisters who had shaped every life that had ever existed. You've been doing this forever, he said, weaving the same patterns, telling the same stories, watching the same cycles repeat. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to create something truly new? To weave a thread that no one expected? To make a destiny that surprised even you? Clotho's hand trembled on her spindle. We cannot. The patterns must hold. Order must be maintained. Why? Goku's question was gentle, curious. Why must order be maintained? Why can't things change? Why can't growth happen? Why can't everyone, gods, mortals, even fates, become something more than they were before? Because without order, there is chaos, Atropos said. Without fate, there is meaninglessness. Without destiny, there is only random chance, suffering without purpose, joy without reason, existence without point. Is that what you believe? Goku asked. That without fate, everything is meaningless? It is what we know. Then let me show you something. Goku extended his hand toward the loom. Let me show you what meaning looks like when it's chosen, not assigned. The fates hesitated. For the first time in eternity, they hesitated. Then, slowly, Clotho nodded. Goku touched the loom. The effect was immediate and profound. Threads that had been fixed for eternity began to move, not randomly, but with purpose. New patterns emerged, new possibilities unfolded. The tapestry of fate, woven since the beginning of time, began to change before their eyes. What is happening? Lachesis breathed. Choice, Goku said. Free will. The thing you've never experienced because you've always known what comes next. He looked at the changing tapestry, at the new destinies emerging, at the infinite possibilities unfolding. This is what it looks like when people decide their own paths, when they choose to grow, when they refuse to accept that their story is already written. The fates watched in wonder as their creation transformed before their eyes. He's not destroying it, Clotho whispered. He's enhancing it, making it more. He's adding threads, Lachesis agreed. Threads we never could have woven because we never imagined they were possible. Atropos said nothing. She simply watched, her shears forgotten in her hand as eternity itself expanded before her. Finally, Goku stepped back. The loom hummed with new energy, new possibility, new life. There, he said, it's done. Not finished, never finished, but open. Open to change, open to growth, open to everyone who wants to weave their own thread. He looked at the fates, these ancient beings who had never known uncertainty, never known surprise, never known the joy of watching something truly new unfold. You can keep weaving, he said gently. That's still your purpose. But now you don't have to weave alone. Everyone, every mortal, every god, every being who ever lived can add to the tapestry, can choose their own path, can become something unexpected. Clotho looked at her spindle. It was still spinning, but differently now, responding not just to fate, but to choice, to possibility, to hope. Is this better? She asked. Goku smiled. I don't know. That's the point. Now you get to find out. He turned away from the loom toward the light that marked the boundary of the fate's domain. I have to go. My world needs me. My family needs me. He paused, looking back. But thank you for everything. for showing me what fate looks like, for giving me the chance to show you what freedom looks like, for proving that even the oldest, most fixed things can change. He stepped toward the light. Wait, Atropos's voice stopped him. He turned to find her holding out her shears, not threateningly, but as an offering. Take these, she said, not as a weapon, as a reminder. When you return to your world, when you face your own limits, remember, even the final cut can be a beginning. Even endings can be new starts. Goku looked at the shears, the legendary blades that had cut the thread of every life that had ever ended. Slowly, respectfully, he took them. I'll remember, he said, and I'll use them wisely. Not to end things, but to make space for new things to begin. He tucked the shears into his belt, beside the spear of Ares. Then he walked into the light and was gone. The Fates sat in silence for a long time after he left. Their loom hummed with new energy. Their threads shimmered with new possibilities. Their domain, once fixed and eternal, now breathed with the unpredictable rhythm of choice. What have we done? Lachesis whispered. Something new, Clotho replied. Something we have never done before. We have allowed change, Atropos said slowly. We have permitted growth. We have opened fate to freedom. They looked at each other, three sisters, three weavers, three beings who had never known uncertainty until today. I do not know what will happen now, Clotho admitted. Neither do I, Lachesis agreed. Nor I, Atropos finished. And for the first time in eternity, they smiled. Above, in the world of light, Goku emerged from the domain of the Fates to find the gods waiting for him. They stood on the slopes of Olympus, watching the sky where he appeared. Not torn this time, not wounded, but simply opening like a door to let him through. He landed among them, breathing hard but smiling, the spear of Ares in one hand and the shears of Atropos tucked into his belt. You're alive, Athena breathed. I'm more than alive. Goku looked at them, these gods who had become his friends, his teachers, his students. I'm changed, and so is fate. He told them everything, the void, the transformation, the loom, the choice he had offered the Fates, and the choice they had made. When he finished, silence reigned on Olympus. You gave fate a choice, Zeus said slowly. You made the weavers of destiny free. They were always free, Goku replied. They just didn't know it. They'd been doing the same thing for so long they forgot they could do something else. He smiled. Kind of like you guys. The gods exchanged glances. There was no offense in their looks, only acknowledgement, only understanding. What happens now? Ares asked. Goku shrugged. I don't know. That's the point. Now you get to find out. You get to grow. You get to change. You get to become something more than you've always been. He looked at them, these ancient beings, these immortals who had never truly lived. It won't be easy. Growth never is. There'll be failures, setbacks, times when you wish you could go back to the way things were. But there'll also be moments of joy you never could have imagined, moments of discovery, moments of becoming. He held out the spear of Ares. Here, this belongs to you. Ares took it, his eyes lingering on the weapon that had accompanied Goku into the domain of fate itself. You brought it back. I said I would. Goku smiled. Besides, I've got my own weapons. He patted the shears at his belt. And my own fights. Speaking of which, he looked at the sky where the rift that had brought him here was beginning to pulse with light. It's time, he said quietly. The rift is opening again. I have to go. The gods gathered around him, not as rulers, not as superiors, but as friends, as equals, as beings who had been changed by his presence. Would you ever return? Athena asked. Goku considered the question. I don't know. Maybe. If the rift opens again. If fate, or whatever comes after fate, allows it. He smiled. But even if I don't, you'll remember. You'll remember what it felt like to grow, to change, to become something new. And that memory will stay with you forever. He stepped toward the rift, toward the light that would carry him home. Thank you, he said, looking back one last time. For everything, for the fights, for the lessons, for reminding me why I love what I do. He paused. And remember, the threads are yours now. Weave them well. He stepped into the light and was gone. The rift closed behind him with a sound like a sigh, like the universe itself releasing a breath it had been holding since his arrival. The gods stood in silence, staring at the empty sky where he had been. What now? Hermes asked. Zeus looked at his hands, hands that had held lightning for eternity, hands that had learned to fight again in a single battle with a being from beyond fate. Now, he said slowly, we grow. Athena nodded. We change, we become. We do what he showed us was possible. Ares raised his spear, feeling the weight of it differently now. We fight, not for dominance, not for glory, but for the joy of it, for the growth it brings. Prometheus, still chained to his rock in the underworld, felt something shift in the air around him. A warmth, a presence, a promise. And on a hillside overlooking the Aegean, Theron the shepherd looked up at the stars and wondered if, perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to existence than the life the gods had assigned him. The seed had been planted. The fire had been shared. And in a world ruled by fate for eternity, something new had begun to grow. #Segmenta6. Months passed in the world of Greek myth. Seasons turned. Mortals lived and died. Gods ruled and fought and loved as they always had. But something had changed. It was subtle at first, so subtle that even the gods themselves barely noticed. Ares spent more time training than commanding. Athena found herself pondering questions that had no answers. Zeus looked at the sky and remembered what it felt like to struggle. And the mortals began to dream. On the hillside where Theron tended his flock, a small shrine had appeared. It was not dedicated to any of the Olympians, not Zeus or Athena or Apollo. It was dedicated to the stranger who had fallen from the sky, the being who had spoken to gods as equals, the warrior who had taught even fate to change. Other shrines appeared across Greece, in Athens, in Sparta, in tiny villages hidden in the mountains. They bore no name. The stranger had not given them one, but they shared a common symbol. A figure reaching toward the sky as if trying to touch something beyond reach. The priests of the old gods noticed, of course. Some were outraged, some were curious, some built shrines of their own. Change was coming. On Olympus, the gods gathered in council. It was not a formal gathering. Those still happened, still followed the ancient protocols. This was something different, a meeting of those who had been touched by the stranger's visit, who had felt the shift in the fabric of existence, who understood that nothing would ever be the same. He's been gone for a year, Ares said, and still I think about him every day, about the way he fought, about what he taught me. Me as well. Athena's voice was thoughtful. I find myself asking questions I never asked before. Why are things the way they are? Could they be different? Should they be different? And if they should, Zeus added slowly, Who has the power to change them? The question hung in the air between them. We do, said a voice from the shadows. Hades stepped into the light, his presence as heavy as ever, but somehow different, lighter, less certain of its own finality. I've watched the underworld change, he said. The dead are restless, not unhappy, just curious. They wonder if perhaps death is not the ending they always believed. They wonder if perhaps there is something after even this. Something after death? Apollo's voice was sharp. Impossible. Death is final. The threads are cut. Are they? Hades looked at him with ancient eyes. The stranger brought shears from Atropos herself, shears that could cut any thread, and he used them not to end but to begin, to make space for new possibilities. He paused. If death can be a beginning, what else might change? The gods exchanged glances. The implications were staggering. If death wasn't final, if fate was not absolute, if the very foundations of existence could shift, we cannot live in uncertainty, Hera said. We are gods. We rule. We maintain order. Without order, there is chaos. Without change, Athena replied softly, there is stagnation. There is death of a different kind, the kind that comes from never growing, never becoming, never reaching beyond what we already are. Zeus raised his hand, silencing the debate. The stranger asked me a question, he said, during our battle. He asked when I had last truly fought, when I had last pushed myself to my limits and beyond. He looked at his hands, hands that had held lightning for eternity. I could not answer, because I had forgotten what it felt like to struggle, to strive, to become more. He stood, and for a moment he looked less like a king and more like a warrior. I will not forget again, none of us will. He looked at his fellow gods, his children, his siblings, his eternal companions. We will grow, we will change, we will become what the stranger showed us was possible. Not because fate demands it, but because we choose it. One by one, the gods nodded. In the underworld, Prometheus felt his chains begin to loosen. It was subtle at first, a slight give in the links that had held him for eternity. Then, slowly they began to fall away, not all at once, not dramatically, just releasing, as if the concept of imprisonment had lost its power over him. He rose, stretching muscles that had not moved in millennia. The eagle that came each day to tear his liver circled overhead, confused, uncertain. Then it flew away, never to return. Prometheus walked to the edge of the cliff and looked out over the river of souls. Something had changed. He could feel it in the air, in the water, in the very fabric of this realm of death. The dead were moving differently, flowing differently, as if they too sensed that endings were not what they had once been. He did it, Prometheus whispered. He actually did it. He thought of the stranger with the impossible smile, the being who had walked into the domain of fate itself and emerged carrying shears of possibility. He thought of the fire he had given mortals so long ago, the fire of knowledge, of hope, of growth. That fire had been rekindled, had been spread, had been shared with even the gods themselves. The age of fate is over, he said to the river of souls. The age of choice has begun. And somewhere, in a world far from this one, a warrior with spiked hair and an endless smile felt a warmth in his chest and knew that his journey had meant something, that the seeds he had planted were growing, that the fire he had shared was still burning. Theron the shepherd grew old. He tended his flock on the same hillside where he had witnessed the stranger's arrival, and every evening he visited the small shrine he had built. He did not pray to it. Prayer felt wrong somehow. Instead, he simply sat and remembered the being who had fallen from the sky, remembered the way he had smiled at gods, remembered the questions he had raised without even knowing it. On his deathbed, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, Theron spoke his final words. He showed us that we are more than our fates, more than the threads assigned to us, more than the stories the gods tell about who we are supposed to be. He smiled, remembering. We are the weavers now, every one of us. Every choice we make adds a thread to the tapestry. Every moment we live creates something new. His children did not fully understand, but they remembered, and they built shrines of their own, and their children built shrines. And the story spread, passed down through generations, changing and growing with each telling. The stranger had no name in these stories. He was simply the warrior who would not be written, the being who had walked into fate itself and walked out carrying possibility. And in the telling, in the remembering, in the endless retelling of his tale, something remarkable happened. The mortals began to change. They trained harder. They reached further. They pushed against the boundaries that had always confined them. Not to challenge the gods, not yet, but to challenge themselves, to see what they could become, to prove that the stranger's lesson was true, that growth was possible for anyone who chose it. Some failed, of course, some fell, some reached too far and were consumed by their ambition. But others succeeded. Others grew. Others became something more than they had been before. And the gods watched and learned and grew alongside them. Years passed, decades, centuries. The world changed. Not dramatically, not overnight, but slowly, inexorably, the old certainties began to crumble. Fate became less absolute. Destiny became less fixed. Mortals and gods alike began to understand that the future was not something that happened to them, but something they created together. The fates still wove, but differently now. Their threads responded to choice as much as destiny, to hope as much as necessity. They had learned to embrace uncertainty, to welcome surprise, to find joy in the unexpected patterns that emerged from free will. Prometheus was freed, not by a hero, not by a god, but simply because the concept of eternal punishment had lost its meaning in a world where even endings could become beginnings. He walked among mortals, sharing not fire but wisdom, teaching them to use the gifts they had always possessed. And on Olympus, the gods ruled differently. Not as tyrants, not as distant observers, but as guides, as teachers, as fellow travelers on the endless journey of growth. Zeus still held lightning, but now he used it not to intimidate, but to illuminate, to show mortals the paths they might walk, the heights they might reach, the possibilities that lay beyond the horizon of their understanding. Ares still loved war, but now he loved it for the right reasons, for the growth it brought, for the limits it pushed, for the way it forced warriors to become more than they had been. Athena still valued wisdom, but now she understood that true wisdom meant knowing when to let go of certainty, when to embrace the unknown, when to trust that the future held wonders no one could predict. And in the hearts of mortals everywhere, a question burned. What can I become? It was the question the stranger had brought with him from beyond the rift. The question that had shaken the foundations of Olympus. The question that had transformed fate itself. What can I become? On a quiet hillside overlooking the Aegean, an old woman sat before a small shrine. She was the great-great-great-granddaughter of Theron the shepherd, and she had heard the story of the stranger countless times. From her mother, from her grandmother, from the elders of her village who had heard it from their elders before them. The story had changed over the centuries. Details had been added, embellished, transformed, but the core remained. A being from beyond fate had come to this world, had taught gods and mortals alike that growth was possible for anyone who chose it, and had left behind a question that would never be answered, only lived. The old woman placed a small offering before the shrine, a flower, a stone, a thread she had woven herself, representing her own small contribution to the great tapestry of existence. "Thank you," she whispered, though she did not know to whom she spoke. "Thank you for showing us that we are more than our fates. Thank you for teaching us to grow." Above her, the sky was clear and blue and eternal. But for just a moment, just a single, impossible moment, she thought she saw a figure there. A small figure with spiked hair and an endless smile, looking down at her with eyes that held the light of countless battles. Then the figure was gone, and the sky was empty again. But the old woman smiled because she knew what she had seen, knew that somewhere in a world beyond this one, the warrior who would not be written was still fighting, still growing, still becoming something new. And that, she thought, was the most hopeful thing of all. In the void between worlds, Goku floated in meditation. He had returned to his own reality long ago, to his family, his friends, his endless battles against ever stronger opponents. But he had not forgotten his journey into Greek myth, had not forgotten the gods who had taught him so much, the fates who had learned to change, the mortals who had begun to dream. He still carried the shears of Atropos, tucked into his belt alongside 1,000 other mementos from 1,000 other adventures. He still remembered the spear of Ares, the wisdom of Athena, the laughter of Zeus during their battle in the void. And he still wondered sometimes what had become of that world, whether the seeds he had planted were still growing, whether the fire he had shared was still burning. But he did not worry, because he knew with the certainty of someone who had faced fate itself and refused to blink, that growth, once begun, could not be stopped. That change, once embraced, could not be reversed. That the question, "What can I become?" would echo through eternity, asked by countless beings in countless worlds, each finding their own answer through their own effort. He opened his eyes and smiled at the void. "Thanks for the adventure," he said softly. "Thanks for the fights. Thanks for reminding me why I love what I do." Then he rose and flew toward the nearest planet, where a new challenge waited. A new opponent stood ready. A new opportunity for growth beckoned. Because that was who he was. That was what he did. That was the lesson he had brought to a world ruled by fate, and the lesson he would carry with him forever. The warrior who would not be written. The being who chose to grow.